Scott Stedman, welcome back to Counterintelligence.
Glad to be back.
Scott, we had quite a week, but first I thought we'd talk about the article, Trump Deutsche Bank loans underwritten by Russian state-owned bank, whistleblower told FBI, and then we can go into everything that happened after.
Sure.
So yeah, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the article.
Yeah, so the article, like you said, was about Deutsche Bank, who was the primary lender to President Trump throughout pretty much his entire real estate career for about 20 years. They lended him over $2 billion. And we at Forensic News have been speaking with a man named Val Brokesmith, who has a bunch of internal Deutsche Bank documents and emails and attachments that were originally his father's, who was a Deutsche Bank executive who sadly killed himself in 2014. And so after that, Val got his father's documents and emails and everything from the bank, and has been running around to various authorities since, trying to get people to pay attention to these documents.
And for those who heard our podcast with Val, which was absolutely one of the favorite things I think we've ever done, it's about 2 hours. And that's why I told you I wanted to also do this sort of companion piece for people who, that was very much about you and me and Val and Forensic News. And this is, I thought we'd just maybe talk a little bit about the article, just for people who maybe you just, get 30 minutes about just the article itself, which you've sort of summed up already.
So we can jump into it. Our lead was that Val has told the FBI recently, in recent months, that he learned from his sources within the bank and around the bank that the Russian state-owned bank, VTB, was actually the underwriter for Trump's loans, meaning that they would essentially take the hit if Trump were to default. This basically gave Trump a line of cash from Deutsche Bank because they had the guarantee from VTB underwriting these loans, according to Val. And this is what he told the FBI. And subsequently, in the article, we lay out supporting evidence for that. We don't have a document with, someone from VTB and someone from Deutsche Bank signing it, but we do have documents that indicate a very close relationship between the two banks. And not only Deutsche Bank as a whole, but the subsidiary of Deutsche Bank that lended to Trump, which is a very important distinction to make. That subsidiary is called DBTCA. And based on Val's documents, we established a pretty close relationship between VTB and DBTCA. And yeah, that's the main crux of the article. And we have more coming soon. Hopefully soon after this podcast.
Yes, to all the Deutsche Bank executives possibly listening to this. Sorry.
Yeah, we do have documents. Sorry about that.
No, and so one of the other things that I think we led with too is that Val, for the audience or people, is a credible, a whistleblower.
Sure.
And that the FBI considers him credible. They've given him an official title, which is not something that happens very often. And also that we confirmed with, I'll just describe bureau sources that VTB, I don't remember the exact quote. VTB is under
So they know VTB very well, is what they said. And they also, indicated in other ways that VTB was a part of their criminal money laundering investigation into Deutsche Bank. And we actually posted documents in the article showing a big liability for DBTCA to VTB, almost to the sum of $50 million. And we don't know what this liability describes, but it does show that DBTCA was in debt to this Russian state-owned bank, VTB.
Right. The article is really broken up into two sections. So the lead is Val.
Well, I should say something about the credibility, because that's where you were going. Val kind of broke into the public eye this past year in 2019 on a series of pieces with the New York Times, who used him as a source, but didn't. I mean, they named him in one as a whistleblower, but through these articles, they kind of painted him as unreliable or not trustworthy. Val does have a history with drugs, and so that was mentioned almost every sentence in the New York Times. And I don't know whether that was intentional. I'm not trying to judge what the Times put out, but I don't know. Me and you have spent various meetings with Val over the past months, and we found him to be a normal, nice guy who is quirky, like billions of people in the world, like myself.
Of course.
And has flaws, obviously, like any human being. But what we look at Forensic News is documents, and
right.
You can say a lot, but if you have the documents to back up at least part of your claim, then that lends credibility to us. Yeah. And so I'll say that for Forensic News. And the other piece is that we obtained correspondences between Val and various authorities showing that his documents actually led to action. Mm-hmm. So in the article, we lay out the New York Fed in early 2017. Val was put in touch with regulators at the Fed through a lawyer, I think in DC or New York. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but a lawyer put him in touch with the Fed after seeing some of his documents because he thought the Fed would be better able to parse some of the raw data. And just a few months later, the Fed came down with a big fine against Deutsche Bank that we are very confident was mainly because of Val's documents. So that's one case. Another case is in Italy, where recently Deutsche Bank executives were sentenced to years in prison for a scheme with the Italian bank Monte dei Paschi. And Val had documents specific to Monte dei Paschi that he transmitted to Italian authorities. There was even back and forth at one time where people in the Italian parliament wanted Val to testify. Mm-hmm. So that's another case where Val's documents and testimony and word has led to jail time for Deutsche Bank executives. Right. So take all this as a whole, and we find Val credible, and that's why we're printing this story.
Yeah. I found just on that note, in all the time we spent with him and writing this piece, I found him 100%, 1,000% credible. And
we've never caught him in a lie. And if you were to read other publications, not just the New York Times, there's a couple others that say he's, I don't remember the exact wording, but somewhat credible or something like that. But right. Like you said, we spent a lot of time with him, and right. We think his documents are definitely legitimate, and they point to a lot of potential wrongdoing within the bank.
Yeah, and I know we touched on this in the other podcast, but there was a kind of comical aspect to that profile. Like you said, like everybody sort of has, I don't know, to me those things were not really relevant and to the big picture. Like we said, someone who has an ongoing relationship with the FBI, someone who we highlighted three examples in our article of actual documented action that have happened after Val transmitted documents. So on that, not to go on and on about this, but just to those listening, you read our piece, you see the action, you be the judge. You be the
exactly. Judge. And we tried to be as transparent as possible. We printed some of what the bank calls a breach report, which is when their liabilities are more than their assets. They issue a report internally. And so in this breach report, we saw VTB, and I think it was actually 5 VTB Central, and then 4 subsidiaries of VTB all had a relationship with DBTCA. DBTCA owed all these subsidiaries money for whatever reason, whether VTB, there's been public reporting that VTB may have issued a loan. We don't know exactly what this liability is, but it definitely shows DBTCA in debt to VTB.
And so that's what I want to highlight. Part 1, which is how we sort of led the article, is that Val, in a 5-year sort of really almost like an odyssey to find out what happened, and his father, through subsources, discovered that VTB underwrote the loans, according or to be specific, Val told the FBI that. But part 2 is that DBTCA and VTB have a relationship. And I know we just kind of touched on that, but that's really the second part of the article, which is pretty big. Could you once again just highlight that for everybody?
Sure. So we know based on Val's documents that DBTCA and VTB have some sort of relationship. Now we know Deutsche Bank as a whole and VTB have a much stronger relationship. For example, this is just one of many examples. Mm-hmm. I think his title is president, or the man who leads VTB, Andre Kostin. Mm-hmm. His son was a Deutsche Bank Moscow leader, essentially. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So while his dad was working at VTB, he was working at Deutsche Bank Moscow, which subsequently got in trouble for Russian money laundering out of that branch. But there's plenty of examples like this. VTB Capital was set up. Their investment banking arm was pretty much set up by Deutsche Bank, and a bunch of people moved from Deutsche Bank to VTB to set up this new arm. So there's a relationship between the parent company, Deutsche Bank. But what we really want to drive home is, like I said, this subsidiary of Deutsche Bank, which is just a sliver of what the bank does as a whole. It's still big numbers, it's still billions, but it is a sliver of Deutsche Bank. This subsidiary where Trump got all this money, there is a relationship there monetarily with VTB. Yeah. We lay that out pretty clearly in the article.
And of course, for those listening, it's at forensicnews.net. Yeah, a little more coffee.
Get ahead of yourself.
Forensicdude.net.
That's our next generation.
Yeah. And that's where the article is. So now, why don't we get to the fun part of this show? Let's talk about what happened Friday morning, a day that will live in infamy, January 3rd.
For us, at least.
I'm getting, by the way, I think we should make T-shirts. I survived, like that kind of thing.
Seriously.
It was about 7 a.m. And go ahead and take us into the scene.
So we planned this meticulously. Like, we researched what day we want to publish. Like, we've been working on this for months. We researched what day we want to publish, what time, like what's best. So we published early morning Pacific time, and then almost immediately, like I know for a fact within 10 minutes, but probably within a minute or two, our website came under a DDoS attack, which is a denial of service attack. Basically, they just flood our servers with attempted traffic, and basically nobody can get on. Right. So we were under attack for approximately 12 hours. We subsequently had this confirmed with
12 hours. I just want to highlight that.
Yeah, for a huge article that we worked on.
The sun was down by the time this was over.
Yeah. So we spent the entire day trying to figure this out. We subsequently had it confirmed by Cloudflare, which is like a internet security service. They confirmed it was a malicious attack, and so did Bluehost, which we host our website on. So we lost out on pretty much that entire day because of the attack. Our servers were down for the entire day, and into the next morning it was spotty. And that's one part of it. And if you want to set up like the PayPal part too, that's a whole nother aspect of it.
Yes, the same time, one of our financial accounts, PayPal, was permanently disabled. In fact, I'm still not clear. Did they ever explain why? Like what happened?
So they said, so this was 2.5 hours after we clicked publish. PayPal sent our business account an email saying, and this is how we get paid. This is yes. PayPal is our lifeline for money.
Yes.
Patreon goes through PayPal.
Right.
Beside the point. But they sent us an email saying that our account has been permanently disabled because we violated some rules, some terms of agreement rules, which we didn't. Right. We don't sell, I forget what the categories were, but like guns or bombs. Like, come on. So our account was disabled, I want to say for 10 hours. And then after, I think it was public pressure. Yeah. Because I know a lot of people tried to get in touch with them. And I even called. I got a robot that said, "Yeah, we're no longer going to serve you."
Yeah.
But that night, they sent us an email saying, whoops, like after further review, you are not in violation of anything.
Yeah.
So we now have that back. But that was part of what we see as a broader attack on forensic news the day that we published this article.
Right. Clearly, whoever was whoever was doing the other attack, probably the same group or individuals or whoever or government or whatever, did something with PayPal to make it look, to disable the account.
Right, which is, I think, indicates a level of sophistication. Like we didn't, our PayPal is very locked down. I think only 2 or 3 people can get into it. And we have two-factor authentication. Like we take internet security pretty seriously at Forensic News. And so having that breach of, luckily it was at the beginning of the month. If it was the end of the month, we would have not had our money for the month. But luckily we paid out before this attack. But I think it just goes to show that this article has shaken some people, and maybe it's on the path to exposing some things that people don't want out there. And so while it was obviously awful to not have, like, I couldn't even get into the admin panel for a long time on the website. Our money was locked out. Like, it was obviously a shitty day. But it also is a sign that we're doing important work. And so I think it should be a little bit of a badge of honor, as much as we can to take away something positive from that. Yeah.
And we have some new business accounts because it's sort of it's not really necessarily relevant to this conversation, but I think it's it's outrageous and emblematic of some of the deregulation that's happened in the last 40 years, that a financial institution can wipe you out with no explanation. You can't even get a person on the phone.
I could not find a person, and the email and all the things that they sent us, they said for 180 days, they can hold whatever money was in our account, which was luckily zero. I just paid out everyone, or else it would have been like thousands of dollars. Yeah. But they said they have the power for 180 days, 6 months to just hold our money.
Yeah.
Luckily it ended up being like 10 hours, but if there was like a sustained attack, like we wouldn't have had access to our money, that we rely on obviously to do these kind of reports.
Right. Exactly. So what's interesting is, let me phrase it like this. So the attack was like, as I recall, it was like instantaneous almost. So
yeah,
just for the sake of conversation, it was so quick. It wasn't like it was up for an hour and then it starts trending. No, it was right. It was like minute 2. Like I never even saw the article till the sun went down, basically. So just curious, who knew ahead of time that this article was coming out? It was only
Yeah, so we obviously reached out to everyone involved in the article to ask for comment. And to be clear, we have no idea who did this attack or anything. And we're not laying the blame on anyone. But it's important to establish who had foresight that the article was coming out when it was. Like you said, because it was so immediate. Like I didn't see the article. We published, everything processed. And I'm assuming there was a few hundred people that got on pretty quickly from my Twitter, but I didn't see the article. And yeah, I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah. While we don't know who did it, just for the
I forgot to finish my thought. Who had knowledge of this? So we did reach out to Deutsche Bank. We had back and forth with some of their PR people. VTB, obviously, the Trump Organization. Rudy Giuliani, Trump's lawyer, and I think that may be it. But all the major players that are in the article, we reached out for comment. Oh, and people that signed, we printed the Trump Chicago loan, for example, and we got in touch with at least one of the people that signed off on that. So we talked to a bunch of people in Deutsche Bank, obviously Val and his subsources, I'm assuming, knew. And the FBI, but we don't think the FBI is going to hack into Forensic News.
I don't think so. Yeah, yeah. No. It was only a small group of people who knew the day and the approximate time. So, again, while we don't know who did it, is something interesting to, I think, bring up.
Yeah, like you said, it was so immediate. Like it wasn't like it picked up steam over an hour, and famous people were retweeting it, and we had a bunch of traffic. And I've actually looked at the IP logs. It's crazy. If you look at the first hour, we had like 15,000 requests from a single IP address.
Yes.
And so you can see really clearly based on the data that this was an attack.
Yeah.
And like you said, only a few people knew about it. So we still have a bunch of questions. Like we kind of been turned away from PayPal. We haven't gotten an answer there as to why our account was limited. Bluehost hasn't really been, they've shared IP addresses with us, but they have stated that we need a lawyer and a subpoena to get any more data. So we've kind of been met with a few blockades, and we do have more questions, but as of now we're up and running and everything's okay.
Yeah, no. And let me just be clear as well. Just to give people a picture, an article that people couldn't even read all day was trending in the top 10 on Twitter. Like literally, that pushed Deutsche Bank right to the top.
That's right. And we had to scramble because this has happened before with like too much traffic with us, but nothing this malicious. And so we were like taking every precaution. And then the first minute it went up, it was gone. So we scrambled. I think within a couple hours we had a backup article on Scribd, which is just like you can upload documents and people can view it. Yeah. But that got like, I think 100,000 views in the first couple days. Since the website's been back up, we've gotten a few more 100,000 views. So we've had over 250,000 people, unique visitors, have read this story. And I think part of what we're trying to do now is just push it into the mainstream. Like That's what I've been doing on my Twitter, is just like, why is nobody interested in a Russian state bank, having this relationship with the small subsidiary that lended to the president of the United States? Like, that's a very compelling story. And I don't know why people aren't covering it. And I don't want to go all anti-CNN, whatever, anti-New York Times, but it is a valid question. Like, we have documents showing VTB is in cahoots with DBTCA. And I don't know why. Maybe the claim by Val has scared them off. But read on past the first two sentences. That would be my advice to anyone that may want to pick it up.
Even if the
there's
first
a lot there
part,
besides,
No, like you said, the first part, even if, let's say, a larger news organization is like, that's going to be hard for me. The second part is we put it in stone with documents, and these organizations have resources and people on the inside of law enforcement that we may not have because we're only 6 months old.
That's right. And it's not hard to call Val.
That's true.
He is a whistleblower. He's on the record now. His name is to it. It's not like this is based on anonymous sources or anything like that.
Right.
And Val, it's my understanding that he's willing to share documents with other outlets. So I don't know why the lack of interest, but we're going to keep pushing it. I don't know if people are going to read it or not, but whatever. We think it's important. So.
Yeah. And also that day, Deutsche Bank's official blue checkmark Twitter account attacked us. Now, if that's to the best of my knowledge, that's never happened with any other news. If it has, then someone correct me, send me a tweet, or maybe you could just tell me, Scott. But I don't think
I haven't seen that. But it's pretty rare. They don't tweet
a
lot as it is, and so to respond, I think they said, I don't know, they insulted us, but whatever. I don't know the exact tweet, but
and the other guy in Germany, their spokes, it was two different accounts. So
yes, we had the Deutsche Bank account saying that there's no truth to any of this, which is just bullshit because we can see the documents. So their official account kind of, did they mention Forensic News? Was it me or was it you?
It's tweeted to you, and it's about the article. Just it's the same statement, actually, almost identical, that we were given by when we talked to their spokesperson.
Right. Yeah. So they obviously took notice. Their spokesman in Germany was tweeting about it too, like you said, and we got their attention, which is, I think, a good thing, considering. I mean, we aren't alleging any criminal wrongdoing at this time with Deutsche Bank, but they do have a history of Russian money laundering. And so when these new connections with Russian state entities come up, it's hugely newsworthy, I think, because it shows a connection to Putin and the state, and something that hasn't been established in previous fines and action against Deutsche Bank and Russian money laundering.
Right. I think their statement the sort of said it all, because it didn't say anything, right? Like it was basically a statement, like it was like two kids, like, not true,
Yeah.
No, it's like like, really?
It was a weird blanket denial that also, I don't know. It's important that we got their attention, and because there is more coming and we validated a lot more, I think that part of it is going to play into our calculus a little bit now.
They're lucky we're such professionals, because I have to be honest, there's a lot of jokes I can make about some of the internal conversations we had with the people who worked at DB, and just if I wanted to be the comedian in me, and I'm not going to do that.
We have plenty of fodder to do like a Deutsche Bank shit talking podcast, but like I don't care about that. Like I don't know. My brain is, maybe I'm, different than most people, but I'm very like analytical. So I like to assess situations and rely on hard evidence. That's kind of why I started Forensic News in the first place.
Exactly.
So their denial is like, I don't know. It's just affirmation that we're on the right track, I think, because we know certain aspects of this to be true that they're denying. So
that was someday. I got to be honest with you. And
I think I was telling you before we started, I think I slept tonight for the first night since. So if you see bags under my eyes, that's why.
The webcams are only okay, so we both look great right now. we don't have those pro cameras.
Not yet.
So from here, what do you think people can expect to see from Forensic News? What's coming up down the pipeline?
Yeah, so we got a lot, not only Deutsche Bank stuff, but I think the most recent thing you'll see, the next thing you'll see, probably this week as you're listening to this podcast, is another Deutsche Bank article that I don't know how detailed I want to get, another Deutsche Bank article that involves Russia, and we'll leave it at that, but there's more evidence on that trail, in that line of inquiry. Actually, probably if we had known about this before, we probably would have maybe even led with this. There's a lot more coming soon. So
we just wanted to, I think, with this particular show, just kind of, again, summarize the article and what happened, just for people who are, you're on your way to work. It's a long article, and the podcast with Val is 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of give a picture of what happened for people.
So just I guess for people to just want a summary, we published Val's word that he told the FBI that VTB underwrote Trump's loans, underwriting meaning that they would take the hit if Trump were to default, which he has many times before. And VTB gave their guarantee according to Val and what he told the FBI to Deutsche Bank. And then we established, like you said, Val as a credible whistleblower who mainstream media people have questioned. Like, he's not an actual whistleblower, which I don't know what is the definition then, because Val, in my eyes, a whistleblower is somebody who sees internal documents and potential wrongdoing and raises the alarm. And that's exactly what Val has done. Right. He has internal Deutsche Bank documents that show troubling relationships. And he's tried to raise the alarm for years. And so we establish his credibility. We get through that. We talk about VTB and Deutsche Bank and their history. And like I said, this week we'll be getting more into Russia and Deutsche Bank.
And for those who heard our podcast with Val, we are definitely going to do another one. Mostly so we can hear more stories.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this. I might have said this on the podcast. He's like Forrest Gump. Like, he's at any time of the year, any year, he's got a story with someone that's like in the news.
Yeah, you call him Forrest Gump. I call him Zelig, the Woody Allen movie. Both
there we go.
Are just totally applicable, just in the funniest way possible. Yeah, you can picture him on like the park bench or something. Did I ever tell you about when I met Glenn Simpson? It's like that one is just
funny because it's all legit. Like, he did live with Glenn Simpson for a little bit, and he did have a really shitty meeting with Adam Schiff. It's crazy. That guy he needs to write a book, I think.
So I told him that, and a TV show. I was like, that's what needs to happen here. Like,
yeah.
I told him, I was like, look, don't lose the funny element. I mean, there's a real, as serious as this is, I was like, in terms of Hollywood, as a, working professional, like, I was like, that's what you want to do. You at Glenn Simpson's, you going to the island, like, that's hilarious.
Yeah. And not only that, it's like, you have to stay sane too. Like with Deutsche Bank, there's a history of like suspicious deaths and suicides. And, we're not conspiracy theorists, but there's an aura around Deutsche Bank that's very negative and it drains people. And we've seen this, time and time again with senior executives either getting super burnt out and just, quitting one day or, all the way to taking their own lives. And it's very, important to mix in some of that humor when there is this very dark aspect to, dark money and the global underworld of, financial transactions. So like you said, like the humor is super important to like level things out. And I think Val brings that definitely.
I'm definitely looking forward to, actually, when we left the session, I remember he was like, next time book the full 8 hours. And I was like,
yeah,
I'll be in the hospital, but yeah, actually, I would like to hear more of your stories.
If we're doing 8 hours, I'm cracking some beers. It's the only way I'm doing that.
Nothing says, I mean, can you imagine an 8-hour podcast? Like,
I don't know if anyone would listen to that.
8 hours. So I think that would be next to self-indulgence in the dictionary.
Yeah. It's like driving to Vegas and back, only listening to that podcast.
Yeah. Scott, any final words, before we wrap this up? Anything?
No, I would just say if you can support Forensic News, we're on Patreon, patreon.com/forensic news, or just follow us on any social media. And we thank people tremendously just for reading and spreading the word, like especially with this article. It didn't get picked up yet by the mainstream media, but we've had a groundswell of people, really grassroots kind of movement, trying to push this article. And so we thank everyone that has read and shared the article.
Right. And we really do hope for those of you, if anyone's listening who works at the New York, well, let's say major publications, let's not go there. But if you just please use the resources and what you have and follow up on this. That's part of why we did it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we wrote for a few different audiences, right? Like the casual reader, the media person, the authorities. Like we have documents, but we don't think the authorities have seen yet. So yeah, I mean, we tried to accomplish a lot in one article. So that's why I think this podcast is especially important to kind of boil things down to what we know.
Yeah. Well, Scott, always great having you back on Counterintelligence, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. We'll be back soon.